Have you ever felt like the world is just shouting at you all the time? It's so loud, right? So how do we find the signal in all that noise? Well, today, we're going to explore a really interesting framework for doing just that, for finding a deeper, quieter truth, and, learning how to listen for what really matters. Okay, so let's jump right in. We're getting hit with messages constantly, right? The world seems to be saying one thing, like, you gotta be the best, or whatever you do, hide your weaknesses. It's all about that perfect image. But then, there's this other voice, a totally different message. It's quieter, and it says something like, just be honest. And this idea that real strength isn't about pretending you're perfect, but actually letting a higher power work through your weaknesses. It's a pretty big contrast when you think about it.
All right, so how do we even start to tell the difference between all that shouting and that quiet truth? Well, the very first step is actually pretty cool. It's all about learning to spot the deeper messages that are kind of hidden in the stories we see every single day.
Okay, let's look at two super simple, everyday examples. On one hand, you've got Tasha. She faces a pretty public setback, right? She doesn't get a scholarship she was hoping for. But check out her reaction. It's not despair, it's faith. Then you have Marcus. His choice is totally private. He gives up something he wants to do just to help his little brother. And he has this quiet thought about what love really means. See? In both cases, there's what happens on the outside, and then there's this much deeper internal response.
So, at first glance, these are just little snapshots of someone's day. No big deal. But what's really going on underneath? How do we get past just the basic what happened and start digging for the real meaning? What are these little moments actually trying to teach us? And this is where we get a really practical tool. It's like a little cheat sheet for analysis. By asking a few simple questions, what's the topic versus what's the theme, what was the reaction, and what's the bigger message here, we can actually start to break down pretty much any story and find what's at its heart. Think of this whole process as a kind of training for your brain, and maybe for your heart too. It's a lot like tuning an old-school radio. You have to twist that dial and listen past all the static and fuzz to lock on to that one clear station. And by doing this with stories, we're basically teaching ourselves to hear those messages of faith and love that are playing quietly in the background all the time. Okay, so once we've had some practice spotting these themes in other people's stories, the spotlight turns on us. The whole process shifts from looking outward to looking inward. The next step is all about putting into words the truths that we've discovered in our own lives.
And this is where it gets really personal. We're moving beyond just analyzing a story on a page. This is your chance to pause and really think. To ask yourself, what are the core beliefs that actually guide me? What are the big truths that my own life has taught me?
And there's a super simple three-step way to do this. You just start with a really clear opening line. One truth I've learned is... Then you just spend a little time explaining that belief in your own words. And finally, you find a verse that really connects with that idea, kind of like an anchor for your personal truth. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I have no idea where to even start, don't worry. These prompts are perfect for getting the wheels turning. Just think about it. When was a time honesty was a huge deal for you? Or how does your faith give you a sense of peace? Maybe there was a time you stood up for something you believed in. It's in those real-life moments that truth stops being an abstract idea and becomes something you can actually feel.
So what's the point of all this? What's the end game? Well, analyzing stories and writing down what we believe, it's not just some homework assignment. It's all about training ourselves, our minds, our hearts, to actually hear what matters in a world that is just constantly, nonstop talking.
There's this amazing old story that captures this idea perfectly. It's about the prophet Elijah. He's up on a mountain, and he's waiting to hear from God. And he's expecting something huge, something traumatic, a hurricane-force wind, a ground-shaking earthquake, a massive fire. He's ready for the big show.
But here's the thing. After all that spectacle, after the wind and the earthquake and the fire were all gone, the message he was waiting for didn't come in any of that noise. It came in the quiet that was left behind. It was just a gentle whisper. And that story just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly captures what we've been talking about. The whole goal of this practice is to develop what you might call a listening heart, one that can pick up on that clear, still, strong signal of truth, even when it feels like the whole world is shouting at you.
So you might be wondering, why is this so important? This focus on finding themes, defining our beliefs, and listening for the quiet stuff? Well, it all ties back to a really foundational idea about what real learning and growth are all about.
This entire approach we've been looking at is built on something called the HeroesMart philosophy.
and at its core is one major belief. You just can't separate education from morality. The idea is that for learning to be truly good and helpful, those two things have to be woven together.
And the main idea behind that philosophy is, well, it's pretty powerful and maybe even a little sobering. It's the idea that knowledge and skills, without a moral compass to guide them, can actually end up doing more harm than good. So the thinking here is that just being smart isn't enough, not by a long shot.
And this whole philosophy has its roots in a promise, right here in this verse from Romans. The belief is that when you set your mind on spiritual truth, it leads directly to life and peace. And really, in this way of thinking, that's the ultimate goal of any education, isn't it? Peace.
So that leaves us with one last question for you to take with you. As you go about your day, with all the meetings, the notifications, the literal noise, just for a second, try to pause and ask yourself, in all this chaos, what gentle whisper of truth am I listening for today?